Trial resumed. Jury not present.
The court said, "Good morning. Please make your appearances."
Mr. Ferguson said, Micah Ferguson, Ryan Finkel, Juliana Murray, for the government. Justin Horton should be joining us shortly, Your Honor.
Mr. Skirek said, "Good morning, Your Honor." Scott Skirek, Sabrina Shroff, Sid Kumraju, for Mr. Gov't. Together at counsel table with Mr. Gov't.
The court said, "Please be seated. Have you reached an agreement with regard to the portions of the materials that the defense seeks to admit?"
Mr. Skirek said, "Sure. I'm happy to address that, Your Honor. I think we've decided to just move forward with government exhibits that the government itself has already put into evidence at this time."
The court said, "Okay. Are there any other issues you'd like to raise?"
Mr. Finkel said, "Not so much an issue, Your Honor, just more of a housekeeping thing to alert the court. After Mr. Medrano, the government is going to call a victim. That victim is going to introduce well. That victim is going to testify about 3 recordings, 1 video and 2 audio recordings. The video. The parties are still discussing a stipulation to the translation of it. It's a Mandarin language video. And we're hopeful we'll reach an agreement on that. What we propose to do is we're going to offer that exhibit. The witness, we believe, will be able to authenticate it. It's Mr. Gov't speaking, so it's admissible. We'll play it for the jury, and just note that it will be translated at a later time. If we can't reach a stipulation on it, we'll have an expert testify as to its translation. With respect to the 2 audio recordings, the witness is just going to authenticate them. We are not seeking to admit them at this time. They are audio recordings of Mr. Gov't in Discord chats regarding what we allege is the scheme. We're just going to seek to authenticate them. We would ask that to the extent the defense has an authentication objection, that they raise it at this time since this is the witness who can authenticate them. But we will admit them later once we have a translation for them."
Mr. Skirek said, "Your Honor, I think we have a couple of issues or questions with what Mr. Finkel just proposed. One is we're not aware of what the foundation is for the video exhibit that the government intends to introduce through this witness. So that's one. Second issue is, without a translation, I'm not sure how we're supposed to cross-examine the witness with respect to the video. So the order of operation the government proposes I think is just not one that is sort of workable as a practical matter. You know, we'll take up any issues we have with respect to authentication of the audio files which, you know, we just received last night. So this is all very late-breaking. The defense is still reviewing what the government sent, you know, late last night. So we will return with any issues we have on the authentication there."
Mr. Finkel said, "Just briefly, Your Honor. This video in particular we got this weekend. We got it translated Monday. Once we got the translation, we sent it to the defense. So they have a translation, and they're free. It's a 2-minute video. They are free to cross-examine the witness using that translation. But in any event, it's just Mr. Govt's statements. It's not statements of the witness. So I don't really know what the witness could say about what Mr. Govt said, other than her interpretation of it. And they are free to cross-examine her on the basis of our translation, which, to be clear, if they agree with it, and they don't have to, we understand that, we would be fine proceeding with that translation. But this is the witness who could put that video in, so that's sort of where we are."
The court said, "But I hear them asking about authentication of the video also. Am I correct?"
Mr. Finkel said, "So with respect to authentication, we believe this witness will be able to authenticate it. She, for example, saw it on Mr. Govt's YouTube page. It's his YouTube account, Mr. Govt's YouTube account. There's an image, screen grab of that video on YouTube. She will be able to discuss, we believe, that that's the subscriber name for Mr. Govt. She recognizes that video. She saw it around the time it was posted, which I understand is in 2019. And it's a video in which just to explain to the court It's a video in which Mr. Gw's says that he will donate $100 million to the Rule of Law Foundation and Rule of Law Society. And that was material we submit to that particular victim and other victims.
The court said, "Does the defense challenge the translation of the video?"
Mr. Skirik said, "Well, Your Honor, we just received the government's translation last night. We haven't had an opportunity to evaluate it. And, so that's number one."
The court said, "All right, so you're saying you need more time."
Mr. Skirik said, "Correct. That's right, Your Honor. And if I can just raise two other points with respect to the video. One is it appears to us, and again, we're still looking into this, that the video the government intends to offer is a clip of a much longer video that was posted. And so, again, it's the same issue that we had yesterday, Having an opportunity to review the full video for completeness purposes, for context. This is not something that we've had an opportunity to do, even if we were to accept the government's translation. And then the third point, Your Honor, again, just to return to the sort of practicalities. How we are supposed to, let me back up. Our understanding is that the witness that Mr. Finkel is referring to is going to testify in Mandarin through a translator later this morning. So how we are supposed to cross-examine a witness who is testifying in Mandarin? Where we don't have an agreed-upon stipulation as to the translation of that, I'm just not sure how that's working.
The court said, "Are you talking about the interpretation of the testimony?"
Mr. Skirik said, "No, Your Honor, the video itself.
The court said, "All right. So, first of all, do you have the entire video?"
Mr. Finkel said, "No, and we're not seeking to offer the entire video."
The court said, "But that wasn't my question."
Mr. Finkel said, "Do I have the entire video?"
The court said yes.
Mr. Finkel said, "I don't believe I do, but I believe it's on the YouTube page. I'm not certain, and I don't want to misrepresent something. To the extent we do, maybe we do, we'll provide it. In either event, I believe we can point them to it on the YouTube page. And just to be clear, Your Honor, the government is happy to allow the defense additional time to consider the translation. But this witness is the witness who will authenticate that video. And separate and apart from that video, she will testify that Mr. Gwa said in a video that he would donate $100 million. So we think that can come in. With respect to timeliness on rule of completeness issues, we won't object on timeliness. We may object on other grounds. But that's fine. We provided this translation as soon as we could, but we understand it will take them some time. That's no problem.
The court said, "So if the witness appears today and they have not resolved their questions about the translation of the video and the audio recordings, I assume you'll hold the witness over until tomorrow. Is that correct?"
Mr. Finkel said, "So, Your Honor, this witness is traveling from another state. She's a victim. We can certainly look to do that. What I think, though, Your Honor, and what I would respectfully propose is that she's going to testify as to her understanding, which they can cross her on vis-a-vis the translation that we provided. With respect to the video itself sort of speaks for itself. And the only issue, I think, would be 106.105, Rule of completeness issues, which if they want to seek to offer from the longer video on his YouTube page, we can deal with that down the road. We're not going to object on timeliness."
The court said, "So if the witness is on the stand, do you plan to introduce the video?"
Mr. Finkel said, "The video from the rule of law, yes. The other two audio recordings we're not going to introduce. We're just going to authenticate, and we can save the admission down the road. Those we don't have a translation to. And so we think that's a different category."
The court said, "So is it that she would be looking at the video, there would be no translation? It would just be Mr. Gwa speaking in Mandarin, and then you would ask her, what do you understand him to be saying?"
Mr. Finkel said, "I think we would do it in reverse in light of this issue. Which is to say she would authenticate this, she would victim. Did there come a time, if ever, that Mr. Gw't stated. You know, that he would donate 100 million in a less leading fashion? Yes. How did you learn about that? I watched a YouTube video about it. And what is your understanding of what he said? She'll testify. Then we'll introduce, Can you authenticate this video clip? Yes. What is it? That's the video where he said it. Government offers. We would submit that's a proper foundation, and it's relevant and admissible as a defendant's statement. We could play it. And we'll just tell the jury, and we'd ask Your Honor to just tell the jury that a translation will be made available later on in the trial. If the parties are unable to stipulate to one, we will put an expert on the stand to testify as to the translation. Either way, there will be a translation. So I think that's how we would propose handling that video. The audio recordings we don't have a translation to. She'll testify about what she recalls of the event and will authenticate the recordings. But we're not going to admit them at this time.
Mr. Skirik said, Your Honor, just one last point. Even what Mr. Finkel proposes here doesn't solve the fundamental issue, which is that we still have no ability this morning, as we are here in court, to cross-examine the witness with respect to the video or any aspects of the video because we don't have a translation.
Mr. Finkel said, they do have a translation. We provided the translation right after we got it on Monday afternoon. I think about 5 o'clock. I think we got it in the trial day. As soon as the trial day was done, I sent it over. It's a 2-minute clip. The translation, I believe, is 1 page, maybe 1 page and a half. And they have had access to translators.
Mr. Skirik said, Your Honor, I believe we received this at about, my recollection is it was sometime around midnight last night. You guys can correct me if I've got it wrong, there are a lot of emails flying around.
Mr. Finkel said, that's incorrect. It was after the trial day. I don't remember the exact time. It might have been 6 o'clock or so, I'm not certain, but it wasn't midnight.
The court said, all right. Would you check your emails, please?
Mr. Finkel said, sure.
Mr. Skirik said, again, Your Honor, with respect to the clipping issue. Unless this witness is going to testify that she was responsible for clipping the portions that the government seeks to introduce, there's still a missing link there as to how the government gets from the video that they say was posted on YouTube to the clip. Again, none of which we've had an opportunity to evaluate.
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, that's not correct. She needs to lay an authentication foundation. And if the witness said, and all that needs to happen is a witness says something is what it purports to be. And if the witness says that's a video or a clip of a video that she saw on Mr. Gw's YouTube page, and Your Honor can look at the video, which is Mr. Gwa speaking, which is part of the analysis whether it passes authenticity thresholds, it's authentic. At least for the jury to consider its weight. If they want to attack the clipping aspect, they're free to do so. But that would go to its weight, not its admissibility. So, Your Honor, this video should come in if they want to cross her on her understanding of what it is. They are free to do so. They have her 3,500 in which she explains what it is. That isn't a surprise, and they have the translation of the clip.
The court said, so do you have the email?
Mr. Finkel said, okay. So, Your Honor, we sent a draft translation yesterday at 11:57 a.m. We sent the certified marked translation, which might have cosmetic differences, at 5:30 p.m. yesterday.
The court said, all right. So that is an adequate amount of time for you to review the translation.
Mr. Skirik said, Your Honor, I think we, respectfully, with the volume of emails and updates that are coming from the government, both during the trial day and after the trial day, I'm not sure I agree that that's adequate time to have an outside translation service check the government's translation and enough time for us to evaluate it, when we just received the video for the first time in the middle of the trial day yesterday.
The court said, all right. So you must be nimble as a litigator and be able to evaluate this material swiftly. what they have proposed, the length of time that you have had to review it, it's not an unreasonable amount of time. I am always one who believes that these items should be turned over as soon as possible so that the defense has the opportunity to evaluate it. And I think in this case you've had an appropriate length of time.
Ms. Shrofa said, Your Honor, actually we don't have access to an interpreter that way in terms of documents or translations. The interpreters who are translating for the court are not allowed to translate documents. We've checked that before. And we have very limited access beyond that point. Also, as we've repeatedly told the government, the way they are sending emails, they do not reach, I'm sorry, they do not reach Mr. Skirik. Whatever email address they are sending it to, and I believe I noted this to the government even yesterday, he does not get the emails. So I think there was a lapse between the time they sent the email to us and the emails from Mr. Skirik which they know are bouncing back. So I believe I'm the one who emailed back and I said you have to include him on that email. But I don't know on what chain that was. But I can tell the court that we do not have this easy access to interpreters that the government is talking about. So I wanted to correct that, Your Honor. And I think that I reached out to the court interpreters, not yesterday, but a few days ago to see if they could translate some documents for us. They checked with the interpreter's office and were told they cannot. So we are struggling with trying to put people in place to do the translations. And even if it came in at 5:30, we had an influx of at least 7 other documents at 1 a.m., I think it was 1 a.m. And we had government exhibits at 1 a.m. We had 3,500 material at 1 a.m., all of which required USAFX download. I know the time because I did the download. So I asked the court most respectfully to allow us at least a break. Because we're not in a position to have done the work that the court thinks we should have been able to do. And we will try to do better, of course. We will try and see if we can line somebody up. I've already reached out. But we didn't have that access yesterday.
The court said, so you are retained, correct?
Ms. Shrofa said, Yes, Your Honor. We are retained, but it's not as wide as the Sargasso Sea. We have people who are trying to help us the most they can. And I just want to make sure that the government, I apologize, the court is aware of the traffic that's coming in just on translations. I'm not talking about 3,500 material from Mr. Weber that is being produced to us in court or an English-speaking witness. That's not what I'm talking about. I can cope, but I cannot cope with asking for. I can't find an interpreter to go with me on the weekend to a jail anymore. On the long weekend, I found no one who could go. So we're struggling. It's not just money. People have to agree to come in.
Mr. Finkel said, 2 brief points, Your Honor. First, the government wants to work with the defense and, candidly, has been working with the defense quite well on translation issues and stipulations and things like that. And we hope to continue to do that. That's first. Second, I'm not going to get into the nuances of who's getting emailed or not.
The court said, but that is important.
Mr. Finkel said, so then I'm happy to. We did email the translation to Mr. Skirik. He's on the email. We were told to actually send all emails to a listserv that Prior Cashman has set up called the Gov't team. We understand that's the Gov't team. So we have been including them on such distributions. And included them on the distribution, I believe, right, at 557. I'll confirm that. What I can also tell the court is after I submitted, I sent the email at 557, which was the marked certified version. Not just the draft. I had a back and forth with Mr. Barkin. Mr. Barkin was checking that translation. It's not very long, with an automated translation service. I didn't hear from him any substantive objections to it. All that being said, Your Honor, the government has no objection to giving the defense an appropriate amount of time this morning to listen to that video more quickly, more thoroughly. They obviously have their client here who spoke in the video and can explain them things. And that's no problem. So that's sort of where we come out on that. Sort of at bottom is this witness is the witness who can authenticate this video. It was material to her. She's going to tell the jury about that. and so we believe it's an appropriate exhibit. To the extent they want to introduce other portions of the longer recording, we're not going to object on timeliness grounds. We might object on other grounds, but we can deal with that later.
The court said, "What about the claims that emails to Mr. Skirek are bouncing back?"
Mr. Finkel said, "So, Your Honor, this email was sent directly to Mr. Skirek. I don't believe it bounced back. It's right there. It's his email address at Alston. There are, I think, 12 or so different attorneys who are working on the defense team. Maybe less, maybe some are paralegals, I don't know. But there's a large group. We were told to email the Gov't team at Prior Cashman, which encompassed everyone. We've been endeavoring to do that. Sometimes there are email chains with various attorneys."
The court said, "So the question then, Mr. Skirek, is did you receive the email at the time that they claim that you received it?"
Mr. Skirek said, "Honestly, Your Honor, I'd have to look. I've been trying to do so on my phone. But the volume of emails that we receive from the government is making it difficult for me to identify that."
The court said, "Okay, please take a look."
Mr. Skirek said, "Sure."
Ms. Strofa said, "Your Honor, I also just want to say that the government has been aware that the Gov't team email does not work for either Mr. Skirek or for me. We are not part of the Prior Cashman law firm. The government has repeatedly noted that those emails bounce back. In response, I literally sent an email saying, Mr. Skirek needs to be added on separately. And I added the Alston email address to that email chain. The defense added it on. I'm not talking just about this email, I'm just talking generally. That I repeatedly, well, not repeatedly. I told the government that the Gov't team email does not work for people who are outside of Prior Cashman. Put that aside. I am telling the court that we did not have access to any interpreter yesterday evening that would have been able to translate for us. That's what I'm saying. And if the government thinks, also, I'm not really sure."
The court said, "Ms. Schroff, you should be putting a translator on retainer so that they are available continuously to you."
Ms. Strofa said, "And they are. And they're translating other documents that are repeatedly flowing in. I do not believe I really didn't focus on it yesterday, the 527 email, and if somebody could check. But I don't think that email even says that we are planning to introduce this tomorrow. So please flag this for immediate attention. I don't think anybody paid any mind to it because of the traffic. I have to say honestly, I don't think the email said anything about the exhibit being used tomorrow. And we have more than one person helping us translate. People don't want to work around the clock. They are not interested. We have a limited pool. We've tried to hire a lawyer who speaks the language. And even that person only works limited hours. And I'm happy ex parte, Your Honor, to share the email back and forth as to what other things we're having those people translate."
The court said, "Mr. Skirek."
Mr. Skirek said, "Yes. Thank you, Your Honor."
The court said, "Did you get the email?"
Mr. Skirek said, "I did, in fact, receive the email. I will just add that it was not clear, at least to me from context, when that email came across from Mr. Finkel, that the government's plan was to use that exhibit with this witness tomorrow."
The court said, "All right. So now the government knows the difficulties that you've been having with translation. And the government going forward will point out that an attachment needs to be translated because you intend to use that during witness testimony."
Mr. Finkel said, "Your Honor, yes." And indeed, the 1157 email was the proposed translation and certificate. The 557 email, which was the marked version, said, "Please let us know if you'll stipulate to the accuracy of the attached translation or if you have any corrections to it. We may offer this video tomorrow, meaning today."
The court said, "So I just don't think you can ask more of the prosecution. They've alerted you to the fact that they intend to introduce certain evidence. They have alerted you to the fact that you need to check the translation to see if you will agree, and stipulate to the translation. What more do you want?"
Mr. Skirek said, "Your Honor. It's simply Ms. Schroff's point, we're focusing narrowly on this one particular email and this one particular document. but we can represent to the court. And I don't think there would be any dispute between the parties that the volume of productions not only of 3,500, but of additional exhibits, in addition to witness orders changing pretty much every day, you know. From the Saturday email that comes out where the government first tells the defense who it plans to call, you know. I think last week that list changed virtually on a daily basis. So just to give the court some context, you know. It's not just about this single particular email, obviously that's why we're discussing this now, it's ripe. The witness is going to testify today. But the defense is dealing with a tremendous influx of information that's coming from the prosecution. And changes both in order and changes in exhibits. And then when you throw a translation issue on top of that, which is often the case, it makes it very difficult to deal with when it's all happening at the last minute. And we just want to give the court that context.
The court said, well, I think that most attorneys in Manhattan would agree that you have some of the finest defense lawyers on your team. Perhaps you need to augment and add someone in order to cope with the volume of information that is coming your way.
Ms. Strofa said, we have tried to find someone who speaks the language, Your Honor. Again. I'm happy to come to sidebar X part and show the court. But I can assure you that we have no interest in not checking a translation if we have the manpower. Again. I did not look at the 5:30 email substantively at all. That might have been my error. But I can assure you we have more than one person with dual language skills helping us. And I'm not sure I can find more, but I will endeavor to try. I had one other translator that I was using that was traveling up until now. Hopefully she will be back and into circulation, and we will try to do better. But for today's witness, we are where we are, and I'm not really sure how else I can fix the problem.
The court said, so the question is now, when is it that you'll review the translation with regard to the video? Mr. Finkel, are you proposing that they do that before you call your witness?
Mr. Finkel said, Your Honor, we have no objection to either. If they want to take the time now, it's certainly Your Honor's prerogative. If they want to take the time now, the government has no objection to that. And that's fine. We can start a little bit delayed today, that's fine. If they want to wait until after Mr. Medrano, for example, and then review, that's fine too. We can give the jury a break after Mr. Medrano. The government is fine either way.
The court said, Mr. Skirek, did you want to say anything?
Mr. Skirek said, the defense would prefer, all things being the same, to take a break after Mr. Medrano. We're hopeful of getting a translation a bit later this morning, perhaps around noon.
The court said, very well. Is there anything before I have the jurors come in?
Ms. Strofa said, Your Honor, just one very small matter. Would it be possible for people to be seated in the third row on the side? I'm told that there are people who want a seat and there is no more overflow room. So I was asked to request of the court, and I'm just asking, that's all.
The court said, I'll consider that, but I don't have an answer for you right now.
Ms. Strofa said, Yes, Your Honor.
The court said, would you have the jurors come in?
Ms. Strofa said, Your Honor, may I step out? I am just going to try and find the interpreter.
The court said, I am having the jurors come in.
Ms. Strofa said, Okay.
Continued on next page. Jury present.
The court said, would you have the witness resume the stand, please? Please be seated. Good morning, jurors.
The jury said, Good morning.
The court said, Good morning.
The witness said, Good morning.
The court said, remember that you're under oath. Please resume cross-examination.
Mr. Skirek said, Thank you, Your Honor.
Shamel Medrano, called as a witness by the government, having been previously duly sworn, testified as follows. Cross-examination, continued, by Mr. Skirek.
Mr. Medrano, excuse me, thank you for coming back. Of course. This morning. I believe yesterday when the trial day ended, we were watching a video. I'm going to just take you back slightly to a different video. And then we will resume with that video just so that everyone understands from context, including, most importantly, Mr. Medrano. Mr. Skirek said, so if we can please pull up Government Exhibit C, 63T. Mr. Medrano. Mr. Skirik said, I'm sorry. I apologize. Let's first pull up Government Exhibit C9 at page 6. Apologies. Okay. Mr. Medrano. You recall yesterday testifying about the summary chart that's in evidence as Government Exhibit C9, right?
Correct.
Do you recall testifying about this particular entry that is dated June 2, 2020?
Yes, I do.
And you see here that the source of the selected content is Government Exhibit C63.
Yes.
Mr. Skirik said, okay. And now if we could please go to Government Exhibit 63T.
Mr. Ferguson said, Your Honor, that's not in evidence.
The court said, I don't have that in my book here. Would you refer to the page?
Mr. Skirik said, 63T is not in the book, Your Honor. And if I may just have a moment with Mr. Ferguson.
The court said, okay.
Counsel conferred.
Mr. Ferguson said, I'm sorry, Your Honor. It wasn't offered by me, but it was offered earlier by Ms. Murray. It's my mistake. It is in evidence.
The court said, is it in the book?
Mr. Skirik said, no, Your Honor. I believe the court and the jury has only the summary chart, which is Z9. This is the underlying document, which is a transcript which we will display for everyone.
The court said, thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Skirik said, so now if we can please pull up 63T. Thank you.
By Mr. Skirik.
Again, Mr. Medrano. This is one of the source documents for that entry in the chart that we were just looking at a moment ago, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Skirik said, okay. And if we can please go to page 5 of this document. Mr. Medrano, are you familiar with something called the NFSC?
I am not.
Okay. If we can focus your attention on the entry in this chart that is marked with the time mark 709. Do you see it at the bottom there?
Yes, I do.
I'm just going to read from the bottom there, and you'll let me know if I get this right, please. Now in the United States, some people who are in collusion with the Communist Party, agents, spies, sent out by the Communist Party. People of common interests have completely disregarded the rules of law of the United States and are strongly attacking all our media. Mr. Skirik said, I'm sorry, I think we've lost it on the screen. If we can.
The court said, one moment please. Mr. Garcia, if you would please step over here. Go ahead.
Mr. Skirik said, thank you, Your Honor. If we can please move to the next passage for what's being displayed to the jury. So my dear fellow fighters, it can be said that from our entire media platform and whistleblower movement's fellow fighters, the efforts of billions of fellow fighters have awakened the world. At the same time, we are set up. And we have become the biggest enemy of the Communist Party and the groups that they fear the most. This includes the $4 billion that the Communist Party has spent to halt. Hackers are trying to stop the ceremony of the declaration of our founding of the new federal state of China tomorrow. June 3rd at 7 p.m., New York time, and the day after, that is, before 12 p.m. on June 4th. Now, the $4 billion has seen the first results, the impact, and the infiltration in social media, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook and other major media, including hacking, have reached military level like never before. However, I believe that it will not stop our fellow fighters from aspiring to freedom, to dignity, to have a family that can live without fear, and to a safe, good life. Did I read that correctly, Mr. Medrano?
You did.
The court said, one moment please. Go ahead.
Mr. Skirik said, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Medrano, that excerpt that I just read was not in the summary chart that you created, correct?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Skirik said, now. If we can please go to the video that we were watching at the end of the trial day yesterday that includes Mr. Bannon. We won't replay the entire thing, we'll pick up just about 15 seconds or so before we ended yesterday for context. But for the record, this is Government Exhibit W1005B in evidence.
Video played.
Mr. Skirik said, thank you. Now, Mr. Medrano, if you could please turn to Government Exhibit C11. Which we should have a hard copy of.
I don't have a hard copy of that one.
Mr. Skirik said, may I approach, Your Honor?
The court said you may.
Mr. Medrano, the passage that we just listened to on the video, that's not included in your summary chart. Is it?
It is not included in the summary chart.
And would you agree with me that the passage that we just listened to and watched, in fact, comes in between the first entry on the summary chart and the second entry on the summary chart?
I don't know what time this video was played at. I mean, if you...
Okay. We're happy to play it again for context.
No, I understand. I'm saying the first passage on the summary chart, it indicates 1 hour 16 minutes and 15 seconds. The next one is at 1 hour 23 minutes and 34 seconds. What you currently played, I'm not sure when it was. So I wouldn't be able to say if it was played in between.
Sure. And I'll represent to you that what we just watched began at 1 hour 23 minutes and 10 seconds and ended at 1 hour 23 minutes and 44 seconds.
Got it. Okay.
So would you agree with me that what we just watched comes in between the first entry on that chart and the second entry on the chart?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Bannon didn't mention in the clip that we just watched anything about the rule of law fund. Right.
In the clip that we just watched?
Correct.
I do not recall hearing that, no.
And Mr. Bannon didn't mention anything in that clip about $100 million donation to any foundation, right?
I don't recall hearing that, no.
And you recall yesterday?
The court said, Mr. Medrano, if you would speak into the microphone.
The witness said, "Sorry, Your Honor."
And you recall yesterday that I asked you about this watermark that is displayed on the exhibit that's on your screen in the upper left-hand corner. Gov't.
Correct.
And you don't know whether Mr. Gov't financed with his own money Gov't's activities, do you?
I don't know.
Mr. Skirek said, no further questions at this time.
The court said redirect.
Mr. Ferguson said, thank you, Your Honor.
Redirect examination. By Mr. Ferguson.
Good morning again, Mr. Medrano.
Good morning.
You were asked questions about statements Gov't made about the CCP, do you recall that?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, if we could please publish Stip 2. Stip 2. Government Exhibit Stip 2. Mr. Medrano, do you see this says stipulation regarding web pages and videos?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, if we could go to page 24, Ms. Loftus. And Mr. Medrano, do you see the second one from the top as GXW 1012 and GXW 1012V?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, the government offers Government Exhibit GXW 1012 and 1012V.
Mr. Skirek said, can we just have one moment, please?
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, if we can just show just the witness and counsel GXW 1012V. And we don't want to play any sound. But maybe we can click through a couple portions of the video so they can see. If you can click through a few.
Mr. Skirek said, Your Honor, no objection. Although it's hard to tell whether this video is going to take us beyond the scope of cross.
The court said, it is admitted.
Mr. Ferguson said, thank you, Your Honor.
Government's exhibits GXW 1012 and GXW 1012V received in evidence.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, if we could please publish this video now.
Video played.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, we could go to Government Exhibit Z9 at page 99, please. And if we could zoom on the bottom entry there.
By Mr. Ferguson.
Mr. Medrano, focusing you on GXC 221, what's the date of that entry in the chart?
June 6, 2021.
Where was it posted?
gtv.org.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, can we please play GXC 221T?
Mr. Skirek said, Your Honor, beyond the scope.
The court said, if you'll step up please.
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
The court said, what is it that you're seeking?
Mr. Ferguson said, this is another music video, it's titled Hero, in which they discuss the CCP, Your Honor. He was asked questions about did you review statements about Miles Gov't talking about the CCP. This is responsive.
Mr. Skirek said, two things, Your Honor. First of all, I asked whether in the context of the specific documents that I focused on, whether Mr. Medrano or the government included statements about the defendant's anti-CCP position. I didn't ask generally whether he reviewed anything about that goes to anti-CCP, number 1. So this is well beyond the scope. Number 2, I believe at the end of that first clip, there wasn't a single question put to the witness about that document. The government is merely using this as a vehicle to play additional documents to the jury. And they have no questions for Mr. Medrano, they didn't ask one at the end of that. And they did the same thing yesterday, so I suspect they are going to continue to do it again.
Mr. Ferguson said, "Excuse me, Ms. Schroff."
The court said, "Let's take turns, please. He started first. Go ahead."
Mr. Ferguson said, "Thank you, Your Honor." Just on the last point, Mr. Medrano is a summary witness. I'm happy to pose a question to him, but he has no personal knowledge of the case. But after playing the video, I'm fine doing that. With respect to...
The court said, but his point was that he did not ask generally about whether he knew about Mr. Gw's comments about the CCP. He was referring to specific material. This is now different from that.
Mr. Ferguson said, "Actually, Your Honor, I believe that the question posed initially with him was, there wasn't statements in this chart or you didn't testify about statements about the CCP, right?"
The court said, "Okay, so then let's go back and take a look. If you could go to the beginning of his cross."
Record reviewed.
The court said, "I just went through the cross-examination. I don't see a reference to the CCP. Or he's not asking whether the witness knew of any material contained in the documents referring to the CCP."
Mr. Ferguson said, "Your Honor, it was yesterday at the very start of his cross-examination. And obviously the scope of redirect is not just the cross this morning, but the full cross."
The court said no.
Mr. Ferguson said, "The very first."
The court said no. The scope of the recross, the scope of the redirect goes to.
Mr. Ferguson said, "The cross."
The court said, "Exactly."
Mr. Ferguson said, "And his first question yesterday, Your Honor, was on direct. Did the government take you through any selected content in the chart in which Mr. Gov't talks about the CCP? And this is in the chart, and it's about the CCP. So we want to play it. It will take 4 minutes. It's in evidence. That's it."
The court said, "Okay, so that was at the beginning of the cross yesterday. You agree that that's accurate?"
Mr. Skirik said, "If that's what the transcript says, I have no doubt."
Ms. Schroff said, "Yes, but it's about the selected videos that he's shown. It's not about the CCP in general."
Mr. Ferguson said, "This is one of them."
Ms. Schroff said, "Please don't interrupt me now. Your Honor, if you just take a look at the videos. These videos are not about the CCP and Mr. Gov't. The videos are about opulence and Mr. Gov't. This is why the government chose to hold those videos until they could be played on redirect. So the entire clip now is not even a statement by necessarily Mr. Gov't. It is an advertisement that he made and he is pictured in it. They are not his statements in the sense that Mr. Gov't was giving a speech or he's saying something. The next video clip I'm pretty sure is Mr. Gov't dancing or some such thing. It's beyond the pale of what is a statement that can be attributed to Mr. Gov't. It is also cumulative, Your Honor."
The court said, "In that video, does he address the CCP?"
Ms. Schroff said, "No."
Mr. Ferguson said, "Yes."
Ms. Schroff said, "I believe there's a song about the CCP. I don't think he ever opens his mouth and speaks."
Mr. Ferguson said, "He's the singer."
Ms. Schroff said, "Excuse me, sir."
The court said, "One moment, please."
Ms. Schroff said, "He doesn't speak. The song is in the background."
The court said, "Is he the singer?"
Ms. Schroff said, "I couldn't tell. If he's..."
Mr. Ferguson said, "Yes."
Ms. Schroff said, "If he's singing on an overlay, it's still a song. It's not a statement."
The court said, "One moment."
Ms. Schroff said, "In a recent case before..."
The court said, "Sorry. One moment. So you're saying that it is his voice singing about the CCP, is that correct?"
Mr. Ferguson said, "Yes. And it's in evidence already. I'm just going to play 4 minutes of it."
Ms. Shrofa said, and under the recent.
The court said, if it's his singing about the CCP, these are statements, song statements.
Ms. Shrofa said, well, Your Honor, there is recent rulings, especially one by Dearcy Hall. The Honorable Dearcy Hall in the Eastern District of New York. That rap lyrics and songs about the content of what somebody is or is not doing are not necessarily admissible in statements attributed to that person.
Mr. Ferguson said, this is in evidence.
Ms. Shrofa said, because it is in evidence does not mean it is properly before the jury for this particular point, sir. For this particular point. It is not a statement from Mr. Gov't. His mouth is not making the statements. It's an overlay song. Your next video is about him dancing. What the government is trying to show here is his opulence. It is very prejudicial to play it at this juncture. And if the court can just take a look at the videos before they are played to the jury, maybe it would understand the argument I'm inarticulately trying to make, which is it is both cumulative and prejudicial to do it now.
The court said, let me start by saying that I love Judge Dearcy Hall.
Ms. Shrofa said, I do, too.
The court said, and I admire her thinking. But this is a different case, a very, very, very different case. What does the song say in the video?
Mr. Ferguson said, so it goes to their argument that he is a legitimate dissident being oppressed by the Communist Party holding these rallies. They played that clip of him at the Rule of Law launch where he's talking about being attacked.
The court said, what is said in the lyrics?
Mr. Ferguson said, I don't have it memorized, but he's basically talking about how the CCP is coming after them. We're going to fight them. That's essentially it.
The court said, what's the name of the song?
Mr. Ferguson said, Hero, Your Honor. It's called Hero. And it's him dancing around with people. And it goes to it. It's 4 minutes long. It's in evidence, it will be shorter than the sidebar.
Ms. Shrofa said, it goes to his opulence, which is what this video went to. He doesn't, excuse me. The song never once says he is being persecuted or prosecuted by the CCP. In fact, he's just talking about the general world fighting CCP. And I think if the government really is firm on its argument, they should get the lyrics to the court, because never once does Mr. Gov't say the CCP is coming after me. Here I am fighting back.
The court said, so Mr. Gov't holds himself.
Indiscernible crosstalk.
The court said, don't talk over me, Ms. Shroff.
Ms. Shrofa said, sorry.
The court said, Mr. Gov't holds himself out as a leader of the anti-CCP movement. We've had witnesses who have stated that they relied on his representations.
Ms. Shrofa said, true.
The court said, it is relevant and it comes in.
Continued on next page. In open court.
The court said, overruled.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, if we could please publish Government Exhibit C-221V. And if we could play the video, please.
Video played.
Mr. Ferguson said, if we could pause it.
By Mr. Ferguson.
Mr. Medrano, what does it say on your screen?
Hero.
Mr. Ferguson said, if we could play that, please.
Video played.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, we can stop there. And if we could go back to Government Exhibit Z9, and we'll go to page 15. Mr. Medrano, you were asked questions on cross-examination about the NFSC, do you recall that?
Yes.
All right. Now, looking at this entry on the chart on page 15, what's the date of this entry?
June 28, 2020.
Where was it posted?
gnews.org.
And are there subtitles on this video?
Yes.
So before we read the subtitle, can you read the caption to the right of the date?
The NFSC, G-Series and Himalaya Farms.
Can you read the subtitle, please?
Me, Miles Gway, will never ask for a cent from you for G-Series.
Mr. Ferguson said, Ms. Loftus, could we please play Government Exhibit C-160V?
Mr. Skirek said, objection. Scope.
The court said, overruled.
Mr. Ferguson said, thank you, Ms. Loftus. We'll just play the first few seconds.
Video played.
Mr. Ferguson said, pause it. Now, Mr. Medrano, how long is this video?
25 minutes and 26 seconds.
The whole video is in evidence, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson said, all right. Now, Ms. Loftus, let's go back to the chart. And Mr. Medrano, I'm not going to play the full video. But could you please read the text that's in the chart underneath GXW160V? And we'll go until a little bit onto page 16. But you can start reading on page 15, please.
The NFSC, please remember in the future that it is a quasi-political entity. The G-Series, GTV, G-Fashion, G-Club, G-Coin, and G-Dollar have no substantial connections with the NFSC. It is like an NGO. But the G-Series are completely commercial institutions, including the Himalaya Farms. The Himalaya Farms across the world are registered as limited companies, all according to local law, depending on how much you invested. The amount you invested will determine through a shareholder system how much power, level of management authority and profit sharing you entitled to possess. To the bothers in arms who wanted to donate to the Himalaya Farms, let me say this once again, any Himalaya farm that accepted donations will all be disqualified. You can invest, but you cannot donate. Our whistleblower movement does not tolerate the act of asking for money. Me, Miles Gway, will never ask for a cent from you for G-Series. Don't confuse the investment with this donation.
And you can just read. We'll end with the next excerpt, please, Mr. Medrano.
This is completely a business operation. Do not link the G-Series under any circumstance to the NFSC. That is all bullshit.
Mr. Ferguson said, no further questions.
The court said recross.
Recross-examination. By Mr. Skirek.
Mr. Medrano, does the fact that the NFSC may be separate from any G-Series investments as you just saw in that document make Miles Gway any less of a political dissident?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, sustained.
Mr. Skirek said, no further questions.
The court said, all righty. Thank you. You may step out.
The witness said, thank you, Your Honor. Witness excused.
The court said, and the government may call its next witness.
Mr. Horton said, Your Honor, the government is happy to call our next witness. We had understood the court wished to take a break after Mr. Medrano to address an issue.
The court said, that is correct. I did state that I wanted to take a break at this time, and so, members of the jury, remember that you're not allowed to discuss this case amongst yourselves, or with anyone else. And don't do any research about the case and don't read any accounts in the news media or any other source. You may step out.
Jury not present. Continued on next page. Jury not present.
The court said, how long does the defense need?
Mr. Skirek said, Your Honor, I think 15 or 20 minutes, if that is okay with the court.
The court said, all righty. We'll take 20 minutes.
Mr. Skirek said, thank you, Judge.
Recess.